Greetings and welcome to room 303. This is Senior English A, and we are in your hymnals on 486, 487. We now turn to the third of our John Donne offerings, the great metaphysical poet. We're going to look at one of his holy sonnet number 10, this collection of sonnets. I'm with you on 487. Just read with me on the background information really quickly. Writers in Donne's day often depended on the support of patrons, wealthy supporters of the arts. The young Donne did not publish his poems. Most were printed only after his death. Instead, they were circulated among a select literary audience that included patrons such as the Countess of Bedford after Donne was dismissed from his position with Sir Thomas Egerton. He and his family depended in part on patrons for financial support. When he became a clergyman, Donne no longer needed to capture the interest of patrons. He continued, though, to write impassioned, witty verse, such as the holy sonnets. Now let's point out for your notes at level 1 and 2b really quickly. By holy here, we mean religious. So write that down. We mean religious. So we are talking now about a religious concept. And he numbered these, and maybe the most famous is Sonnet 10. Let's jump to 2b really quickly. Let's remind ourselves. Sonnet. 14-line poem, end rhyme, okay? So notice the last word of the first line, the, rhymes with the last word of the fourth line, me. Do you see that? Last word of the second line, so, rhymes with the last word of the third line, overthrow. Do you see it? So we've got an A, B, B, A, and so on construction, all right? And then finally, you're going to have some iambic pentameter, right? Ba-bum, 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 ba-bum. Right? Mighty and dreadful, for thou art not so. Line 2. Mighty and dreadful, for thou art not so. Ba-bum, 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 ba-bum. So we have iambic pentameter. But the other thing we want to say at 2b about John Donne and this sonnet is, whereas most sonnets dealt with the theme of love, John Donne plays the game of dealing with a different topic than specifically romantic love. Okay? More particularly, this is the poem of all poems that get read at funerals. Write that down at 2a. This is the poem that gets read at funerals. We mentioned before when we were studying the King James Version of the Bible, Psalm 23 gets read a lot at funerals, but this poem gets read a lot at funerals for reasons that we're going to understand. Let's write this down now at level 2a. The question of the poem is simply this: what is death? What is death? Now, the way that John Donne plays this game is personification. Let's write that down at 2b. Personification. What does that mean? To personify death means the following. You talk to death as if it's a person. I'm going to take it one step further and say it this way for your notes. You talk to death as if it's a bully. So think about, for example, someone in the school who's kind of not a very nice person, kind of mean and a bully. And you walk up to that somebody who's not a very nice person and you say, hey, you need to knock it off and let me tell you why. You're nothing. You can imagine the bully's like, excuse me? Because I'm about ready to tear your little head off. And you say, no, you're not hearing me. You're nothing. Imagine walking up to death and saying, you're nothing. Imagine walking up to death, the thing everyone fears the most, and saying, I'm not afraid of you. Let's take a look at how he says it. Death, he says, read it with me, 487. Death, be not proud, though some have called thee mighty and dreadful, for thou art not so. For those whom thou thinkest thou dost overthrow, die not, poor death. Nor yet canst thou kill me. From rest and sleep, which but thy pictures be, much pleasure. Then from thee much more must flow, and soonest our best men with thee do go, rest of their bones and soul's delivery. Thou art slave to fate, chance, kings, and desperate men, and dost with poison, war, and sickness dwell, and poppy or charms can make us sleep as well and better than thy stroke. Why swellest thou then? One short sleep past, we wake eternally, and death shall be no more. Death, thou shalt die. Now, this is a fascinating poem. Let's take a look. It's a very simple poem, by the way. It says some very simple truths, but it says it in a compelling way. The entire poem is spoken to death, that which most humans fear the most. Right? And about that, he says what to death? Let's take some notes at level 1. We are, again, just summarizing. In our own words. First, he says, don't be proud. He imagines death later in the poem as being kind of this really puffed up, swollen, conceited, big bully that thinks it can do anything and get away with it. And he's like, yeah, you're none of that. Death, be not proud. He says, some have called you mighty and dreadful, but you're not. In other words, let's put it in our notes right away. By the end of the second line, we know what he's saying to death. He's saying, I don't sweat you. I don't fear you. I'm not worried about you. You can't scare me. Notice he continues with line 3. For those whom thou thinkest thou dost overthrow, die not, poor death, nor canst thou kill me. Now, of course, this we've said in many times in lectures in 303. Mr. McGee is giving the lecture, and all of a sudden he just cranks over and dies. There it is in the middle of the floor. Study your language. Oh, the old man is gone. But what if for a moment, and don't let this freak you out because it's just a thought experiment, but go along. What if for a moment my body could talk? And my body would say, I'm not gone. I'm not gone. Everything I was before a few seconds ago, before I flatlined, still here. Same skin, same blood, same brain. I haven't gone anywhere. Why did you just say the old man is gone? Well, that's a very interesting question. What is it that goes when we say someone has died? Because the body is right there in front of us. Now, granted, if it lays there long enough, what do we know about decay? Obviously, it's going to go back to the dust from which it came, right? But what do we mean when we say, uh-oh, Mr. McGee is gone? Well, we're talking, obviously, about two of you. We're talking about your body, but we're also talking about your mind or your soul, your spirit, your energy. And about that, Donne says, oh, death, you poor little fool. You think you can actually touch me because you can kill my body, but you can't touch my soul. You can't touch my mind. You can't touch my spirit or my energy. Because what do we know about energy? What did they teach you in science class? Energy, that which can be neither what? Created or destroyed, right? In other words, you can't kill me, he says. You can only kill my body. Ha ha. And you think I'm going to be afraid of you? You can't kill me. Wow, take a look. You can see why this poem obviously read at funerals to give a lot of people great comfort. Look at the next one. He says, from rest and sleep, which but thy pictures be, much pleasure. In other words, every senior knows this. What is death? Laying down, taking a nap. What senior doesn't want to lay down and take a nap? It's like the thing, always highest on the list of what would you like to do if you get an afternoon off. Dude, I'm going home and taking a nap. Freshmen are all like, I'm going to go do this and do that. Seniors are always like, dude, I'm just going home and taking a nap. Why? Because they're already realizing how much more fatigued they are. He says, taking a nap, that's all dying is. I get to lay down and take a nap. What's there to be afraid of in that regards? Then he says, from thee much more must flow, and soonest our best men with thee to go, rest of their bones, and soul's delivery. In other words, it's an interesting idea. The minute I die, I'm doing the exact same thing the most famous people who've ever lived did. In that moment, I'm exactly like all of the greatest people who ever lived. Because guess what? All of them took the nap. All of them died. In other words, death makes us all equal and amazing. Why? Soul's delivery. Now, we're going to come back to this idea. Jot it down at 3a. We're going to come back to this idea when we meet W.B. Yeats's poem, Sailing to Byzantium. Right? That idea that as the body physically gets older, an aged man is but a paltry thing, a tattered coat upon a stick. Unless soul clap its hands and sing. In other words, as the body gets older, this soul, which never ages, the soul is like, yay, the body's going to die. Finally can get out of this body. Same argument here, soul's delivery. He then, are you ready for this? He insults death. This is funny. This is very ironic. We can jot it down in 2b. This is real irony. To insult the biggest bully in the school. To just walk up to the biggest bully in the school and start making fun of the biggest bully and insulting that biggest bully. Take a look. He says it. Thou art slave to fate, chance, kings, and desperate men. In other words, you don't get to choose. He says you don't really choose anything. Everything about you is negative. There's nothing about you that people think of as positive. Everything is negative, and it's all about fate, and it's all about chance, and it's all about whether a king decides to go to war or not, and then all of a sudden a bunch of people gotta die. And he says, and you, with poison, war, and sickness dwell, and poppy, dope, drugs, or charms can make us sleep as well, and better than I stroke. In other words, he says, there isn't really anything that you can do that we can't already do with a little bit of morphine. And we put somebody under with morphine, and they fundamentally, they're just like they're dead. In other words, there isn't anything really that you can do. You really have no power at all. Go back to the first line. Don't be proud. There's no reason for you to be proud, death, because you got nothing on me. Notice he says, why swellest thou then? Notice the word swellest here. In other words, puff up with pride, right? Like you somehow are a big shot. It's like, oh man, you're nothing. Look at the final two lines. One short sleep past. We wake eternally. This will be Donne's theology now coming to play. In other words, after you die, you get to go to heaven, he says. What's sad about that? But look at the last line. And death shall be no more. Once you've died, you don't ever have to worry about death again. And now the paradox. Death, thou shalt die. In other words, after I'm dead, death is over. Which means you're dead, not me. Because I'm going to wake up eternally. His theology tells him he gets to go to heaven. And he lives forever as a soul. So he says, well, really? What's this scary thing about dying and death? There's nothing to be afraid of because the thing that matters the most, your mind, your soul, your energy, can't be killed anyway. Why worry about death? Why be afraid? There's nothing to be afraid of. All right, let's jot it down. Obviously, this is pretty easy at 2A. Let's talk messages and themes really quickly. What is for you the biggest message here? Some students will say, this is really a fun poem of insult. It's a great insult poem. It's insulting the biggest, baddest bully of them all. Remember when we studied Beowulf? That third monster, the dragon, represented the which evil? The evil from which you can never actually escape, that is to say, death. And John Donne goes, the dragon's got nothing. It's like a little tiny lizard that you'd step on with your boot and it's nothing. Death can't be a frightening thing, right? Other students will focus on the idea that this poem is rooted in a certain belief structure that says, there's actually two of me. There's a physical and then there's a metaphysical to me. There's this thing called soul, and that soul doesn't die. And because that soul doesn't die, there's nothing to fear in death. Of course, we've already mentioned a 2B. This is a sonnet. Obviously, we're playing the game of the paradox. Let's write that down. The final line of this poem, that death thou shalt die, is the example of a metaphysical paradox, right? Let's jump to 3A really quickly in relationships to other titles. What is for you your favorite movie about dying? What is for you the film in which the hero of the film dies with dignity, with no fear? And in fact says, I'm not worried at all. Let's jot down maybe the classic text of them all in regards to death and dying from the ancient world, and that is Plato's famous dialogue, the Phaedo, P-H-A-E-D-O. In the Phaedo, Socrates is ready to drink his poison because he's going to be executed by the state because they've had enough of him teaching the ideas that are leading people to have to rethink their life. And so they've decided to kill him. And right before he dies, all of his followers are sitting in the prison cell with him. And they're all bawling. They're crying. Socrates is laughing, the old man. And he's like, what is wrong with you? And there's like, you're about to drink poison and die. And he's like, have you not been listening to anything I've been saying the whole time I've been teaching you? What is there to worry about in regards to dying? And then you have this amazing dialogue about the existence of soul and how Socrates says, death, is like the next exploration. That sounds like fun. That doesn't sound like at all scary. The idea is simply this. Socrates will seem to suggest it this way. At the moment of death, everyone says the words, the same words. The words are, oh my God. The only question is the inflection of the voice. Most people, when they come ready to die, think of Scrooge and that final ghost comes to visit him, right? Points at his tombstone. Remember, the first ghost that meets Scrooge shows him his past. The second ghost that meets Scrooge shows him his present. It's the third ghost that shows him his tombstone. And it's at that moment Scrooge says, oh my God, but with the inflection of his voice says, oh my God, what did I do with my life? I wish I could just give me one more day, right? But there are some people, Socrates says, who live their life in such a way that at the moment of death, they're ready to say the words, oh my God, from a different inflection. They're not afraid. It's here in this poem. They're not afraid. They have nothing to be afraid of. This, of course, carries some weight in regards to losing people we love as well, right? This idea, this poem has given a lot of comfort on that count. Since we're there, let's jump now to 3b. What are your views about dying and death? Has it been for you the penultimate fear? And does this argument work for you, that death will die? That is to say, what are your belief convictions about the soul, about that thing we call your energy? If you are in fact energy, and energy is that which can be neither created nor destroyed, then how do you define death? What is death for you then? And where does that energy go if you can't be destroyed? Where does it go? Do you believe in the notion of the immortality of the soul? That is to say, afterlife. How do you kind of live with that notion of what death actually is for you or for those who you love? Well, there it is, Holy Sonnet 10, proof that you can write a sonnet and it doesn't have to have anything technically to do with romantic love. Thank you.